Welcome to the Service Game, where serve starts the story. I'm your host, Ivy J. And yeah, this is the first episode of First Served, and I can't wait to talk about this year's Australian Open with you guys. I feel like, for lack of better words, for the past week or so, Australian Open hasn't been that entertaining, but over the past weekend, I really feel like we've been fed a lot of good tennis matches. But before we dive into that, I kind of want to start off with a poll. If you guys want to vote in the show notes or just comment down below, do you guys prefer to watch a Grand Slam where all the top seeds are in a draw? So this will lead to more entertaining matchups later on in the tournament. Or do you guys prefer to watch a Grand Slam where the first few days are crazy with upsets, but maybe because of that, the matches later on will be less entertaining? So yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts. Please vote in the poll below or just comment down below if you're on YouTube. Okay, now let's dive right into the main discussion. So in our main portion, we have 3 segments, and because this is the first episode, I'm going to introduce all of them. So the first one is the toss, hence the service motion when you're tossing the ball up. So this is just some news and just some overall things that happened, and it's not going to be the main focus, but it's going to prepare us into the second segment, which is called the hit. So this is where you make the contact with the ball when you're serving, and this is going to be the main chunk of what this week's episode is going to be about. So I'm not going to spoil it for you guys. I'm not going to talk about just yet what the main themes are, but this is going to take up the majority of the episodes. And then we have the follow-through, which is previewing next week of what's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, it sort of just mimics a service motion, and I thought that it was like in a really interesting way to introduce the 3 different segments. So without further ado, let's get right into the toss. So I guess I kind of want to start off just talking about how a lot of people talk about this year's Australia Open, before the whole semi-final weekend, as kind of a boring slam. So has the happy slam became the boring slam? So I found the stat that 13 out of 16 of the top 8 seeds made it to the quarterfinals, which is a lot of the top 8 seeds. And with that, I think it kind of ties into the poll I was talking about, the trade-offs between the lack of upsets creating interesting matches later on in the tournament. So I feel like because there wasn't that many upsets, we did get a lot of interesting matches in the tournament. But throughout this tournament, I felt like maybe on Thursday or Friday, when it was the quarterfinals or the 4th round, we did not get that many deciding set or close matches. But I still managed to pull a few from both the women's side and the men's side that I think are worth watching. So all of these matches, as highlights, are linked in the show notes in the description if you guys want to just go check it out. So yeah, I feel like I want to start off with the women's first. So I counted, there were just 2 1-set matches and 23 straight set matches this entire tournament on Rod Laver Arena. So that is an interesting stat because it just shows how one-sided some of these matches are, even despite the lack of upsets early on. But there were some matches that I think are worth mentioning. So the first one is Venus Williams against Olga Danilovic. So Venus received a wild card, and I think going into it, a lot of people was skeptical because Venus is 45 years old and she isn't an active player on tour. She's still deemed an active player, but she's not actively participating in the tour schedule. And Venus is 45 years old, whereas Danilovic is only 25 years old. So there's a 20-year-old age difference between the two. But just I think everyone in that stadium wanted Williams to win, and some of the backhands Venus hit was absolutely insane. Like, she strikes the ball so cleanly, and her backhand down the line, I think, completely just caught Danilovic off guard. Also, Venus led 4-0 in the deciding set, and if she would have won that, she would have set up a match up against Coco Gauff, but that unfortunately didn't happen. But I think it sort of just made me appreciate the wildcard system more, because I feel like there's a balance, there's a fine line between awarding wildcard to players who maybe are just like, for example, Australian, and they get a free pass in the draw because of their ethnicity or their nationality. But I mean, for Australian Open to decide to give Venus a wild card and for it to actually pay off because Venus was competitive, and I truly feel like she encourages more viewership for the sport. I think this was a really great wild card, and it was truly an entertaining match. And Venus is 45, and the way that she's able to just chase down these balls, even though obviously she's not moving as fast as her opponent, but it's still pretty admirable that she's out there at 45 and challenging like players. And the other match I kind of want to mention is Victoria Mboko versus Clara Towson. So, love Victoria Mboko because I am a student at McGill, so I love cheering on my fellow Canadian athletes. And I think the main theme is just the hustle of Mboko against Clara Towson's overwhelming power, because Towson is known for she's known as a big hitter, and sometimes her power can even manage to force some close matches against Aryna Sabalenka, who is known as the biggest hitter sort of on tour, like on the women's tour. But I think just the hustle of Mboko getting into every point, and also just I think her mental fortitude is crazy, because she's so young, but she was able to still close the match out when in I think the second set Clara Towson saved like 3 match points, and Mboko was also down a break at the start of the third. So yeah, her ability to compose herself being at such a young age and to just come back, I think is pretty admirable, and definitely I think we should keep an eye on her. And I think now let's talk about the men's side. So just like the 4th round was really just, I feel like, shows how one-sided and how lackluster it was before we got into the semifinals. So we had 1 retirement, 1 4-setter, and 6 straight sets, which is kind of sad. But before that, I think there were some matches that I really want to mention, and a lot of them are quite meaningful. So first, I want to talk about, I think, in my opinion, the 2 of the most talented players on the men's tour, Thomas Mahach versus Lorenzo Musetti. So this was a 5-setter, and even though at some points they didn't have it was just like some easy misses, but there were some crazy points at times, because Musetti is the only player in the top 8 currently to have a one-handed backhand, and just he improved so much. Like, his forehand also improved a lot, and his ability to play on hard courts improved a lot. And Thomas Mahach, I mean, some of the points he hit, his jumping forehand is just crazy. And I guess if you don't really know tennis that much and you're just getting into it, this is a great match, because you can really just see how athletic these players are, and just how, I don't know, it was just like some really entertaining matches, and they're both pretty fast movers, so that sometimes resulted in pretty long and entertaining rallies. I really do recommend checking this match out, because yes, especially Musetti's crazy first point he hit at the start of the 5th set, his one-handed backhand. I have that imprinted in my head. It's actually crazy. Okay, but leading into that, we have Musetti versus Djokovic. This was devastating because Musetti led 2-0 against Djokovic, and I mean, I think everyone in the stadium, even Djokovic himself, said that I was on my way home. And at the start of the third, Musetti just started holding on to his right leg, and it became so apparent that he just couldn't continue anymore. Even though he was down 1-3 in the third, I still believe that he would have won this match. And it's just really devastating because he is the third Italian man in the Open era to reach round 16 at all 4 majors. And I truly feel like he improved so much. Like, his best record previously here was, I think, the third round. So for him, I think, last year he lost to Ben Shelton in the third round. So for him to come out here and just challenge Novak Djokovic, who has an insane record at Australian Open, and now we're sort of entering the clay court season, and Musetti's so talented on clay, and we don't know how long this injury is going to keep him out for. It's just, really sad for him. So we really hope he can heal up and get better quick. And then I kind of want to talk about Stan Wawrinka and Gael Monfils. So first, Gael Monfils, he's 39. It's both of their last Australian Open. His match against Dane Sweeney from Australia was like, the vibes are vibing. It was such a good match. I mean, it was because Monfils is known for his athleticism, his jump forehand, whereas Dane Sweeney have this amazing story. He needed a GoFundMe to play, and he was ranked outside of the world top 700, and now he literally is getting enough, I think, prize money to cover his, like, at least temporarily to cover his tennis career. Like, both of them are so inspiring. And I think we really need to keep a look on Dane Sweeney because he's really athletic, and the way he hustles to get to a ball, he's willing to put his body on the line, is pretty admirable. And then we have Stan Wawrinka, who's 40, facing Arthur Gia from France. Stan is the former champion of Australian Open, and he also is a wildcard receiver. I mean, he's just like insane. Like, his ability to play a 5-setter and just like, what a backhand. I feel like that's the thing we're gonna miss the most about him when he's leaving the tour, because his ability to challenge the big four or the big three during the era where they were completely dominant, and to win a Grand Slam just shows how high of a level he is. And I mean, I just do think that he is an incredible player. Okay, now if you guys want to take a little break, feel free, pause this episode, do whatever you want, and come back. But we're going to get straight into the hit. Welcome to the hit. So we have 3 main themes that I want to talk about. The first one being Alcaraz's chase to be the youngest ever to complete a career Grand Slam, Novak Djokovic's chase for the 25th Grand Slam, and is Australian Open Aryna Sabalenka's Grand Slam, or like, what's the story behind that? So let's get right into the first part, which is Alcaraz's chase to be the youngest ever to complete a Grand Slam. So Rafa was 24 when he got the career Grand Slam, and Alcaraz, spoiler alert, he did win this year's Australian Open. He is 22 for getting when he got this career Grand Slam. So I think going into this tournament, it was really interesting because I feel like a lot of players, when a journalist asked them about a statistic, they would often shy away from it, but Carlos did not shy away from the narrative at all, but rather he welcomed it. I remember during one of the press conferences when one of the journalists asked if he would prefer winning this Grand Slam versus versus like winning all of the other 3 combined, he literally had to hesitate, and I think he was sort of leaning into winning this Grand Slam, which is crazy to me. I mean, also adding on to this, there was some like noises over the past, like during the off season, because he part ways with Ferrero, his longtime coach, for 7 years, and I didn't really know how this was going to impact him. I think on one hand, it was going to impact him positively because he's learning to grow and he doesn't have this one coach that he's really dependent on, because I do feel like he was dependent on Ferrero at times. On the other hand, because this is such a crucial Grand Slam for him, I felt that maybe he needed more time to adjust to it, and that will lead to maybe not a great of a performance than he would have liked to. And I think in the end, it just kind of showed his maturity and how he's able to win a Grand Slam even without Ferrero present. But I just want to start off by talking about how dominant he is. So him against Alex de Minaur, which is like just shows the gap, I think, between Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner against the rest of the tour, because de Minaur came into this tournament playing great. He dismissed Tiafoe, and then he was just playing at like really high level, but then him getting destroyed by Alcaraz. I mean, I know that de Minaur had a matchup problem against Jannik Sinner, but I thought it might be a little different against Alcaraz. But yeah, Alcaraz just came out of the gate hitting the daylight out of the ball, and de Minaur really didn't have an answer. So I was devastated for de Minaur, but we can really tell that from that point on, I think Alcaraz was locked in. And then leading into that, I kind of want to talk about the semifinal. So this was crazy. This was the longest ever semifinal in Australian Open's history. It went on for 5 hours and 27 minutes. So Carlos led the first 2 sets, and then in the third set, he started grabbing his right groin, and I thought that it was an injury because obviously like he was grabbing his right groin, and I thought like he pulled something. So he called a medical timeout, and it turned out to be a cramp. But technically, a player isn't allowed to get a medical timeout because of a cramp. And I think that's like a whole other topic. Maybe that's like a second serve topic about like the ethics on that, because I truly feel like a player should be getting a medical timeout. Also, like, it's such a hard thing to like control. Like, a physio is not going to go up to a court and be like, oh, like, you have a cramp, I'm not going to treat you, because it's the same physio for everyone. So then it's just like a player can simply, like, I feel like every player will do what Carlos Alcaraz did in that situation. And also, like, it didn't really matter in the end because Zverev won the 2 set after, like, during when Carlos was cramping, and then we got the deciding set. But Zverev was complaining about Alcaraz getting treatment for cramp. He said that to the umpire, quote unquote, that the tour is always protecting the two, hence Sinner and Alcaraz, which sort of just shows like the sentiment around the players' locker room. But I mean, I don't think this was just like for Alcaraz or Sinner. It's more of just like, what are you supposed to do in that situation? Because a physio can't just be like, I'm not going to treat you because you're cramping. So yeah, but I think moving on, I really want to talk about how Carlos was able to use the crowd to hang in there. And that kind of just shows his maturity, because he was trying to drag the third and fourth set as long as he can, so then he can hopefully get over his cramping, which did happen. And his ability to use the crowd and sort of, it kind of fuels his momentum to keep going. And despite being down a break in the 5th set really early on, he was able to break right back and then break again to seal the match off by winning 7-5. So I think that was pretty just impressive from him overall, because I mean, in the third and fourth set he really couldn't move, which is where we saw a lot of the drop shots coming in again. But for him to sort of like recompose himself and enter the fifth set, use the crowd, I think, yeah, just really shows how he's able to deal with these unexpected situations. And maybe prior to this year, or like before, he needed a coach to sort of help him through it, but I like Ferrero especially, just because of the history there. But I think his ability to come back and be like, I can do this all on myself, while still with like his coaching box, but without his longtime coach, is pretty impressive. But I don't want to take any credit away from Zverev. I think he played well. I really do think he played well, because I feel like just his overall sentiment around Zverev is he's this tall guy, but he's trying to play the point to his opponent, rally until his opponent makes a mistake. But I think throughout this tournament, it's the best we've ever seen him play because of how aggressive he was. He was extremely aggressive, and I think this is more aggressive than we've ever seen him, and I think that's like such a tremendous improvement from last season. Yeah, it was just like he was hitting his shots, he was taking risks and going up to the net and trying to finish off points. And I really do think even in the crucial moments when he's down, he still tried to play that brand of tennis where he's taking more risks, and that's really admirable. So hopefully he will continue this form, because I really do think with this form he's able to make more sort of impact on the tour. Okay, now I want to talk about Novak Djokovic's chase for his 25th title, and then we'll talk about the men's final. So he was going into this tournament, I think a lot of people were just like shaky about how he was going to do. He was just this big question mark, and he did great in the first few rounds, and then he received a walkover against Jakub Mensik, and he was down 2 sets against Musetti. According to him, he was on his way home. And I mean, before playing Sinner in that semifinal, he haven't played a full match in a week. So I think there's 2 sides to that. One is that he's coming in really fresh. The second is he's losing like momentum because he haven't played a full match. And this is the first time we've had 2 5-set matches here in the men's semifinal since 2017. And for me, because Melbourne is like, the time zone is crazy, so I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, I woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, it's still going on. And I was watching it, and it was just crazy because it was such a long match. They played for 4 hours and 9 minutes. And this match was also really meaningful because if Jannik Sinner won, he will become the first player ever to beat Djokovic 6 times in a row. And he was tied with 5 straight wins. Like, he was tied on 5 straight wins with Rafael Nadal. So they both beat Djokovic 5 times in a row. So I think Sinner was chasing that 6th time, and I think going into this match, Djokovic was definitely the underdog. I don't believe anyone really thought that he was going to beat Sinner. And Novak really, to be honest, didn't even really struggle physically except for the 3rd set. But apart from that, he was just hitting the living daylight out of the ball. However, on the other hand, Sinner has a record now of 8 matches. Like, he hasn't won a single match out of 8 matches when it's longer than 3 hours and 50 minutes, which, I mean, I don't think is a physical thing, because I just don't think like 3 hours and 50 minutes is such a precise number. But I think the overall trend we can see is as the matches get longer, it's less likely for Sinner to win. And it's just crazy because I just think throughout this match, Novak just completely out-hit Sinner, which is not something I think, like, it's not something that I would say normally, because Sinner is, like, the cleanest hitter on tour. And Novak is 38. And Sinner had, like, a 90% first serve win rate, I believe, like, in the second set or the third set. But also, I think Sinner was just more, like, surprised than Alcaraz, because this sort of also ties into the final, because Alcaraz was exposed to this level of Djokovic when he lost to him in the Olympic final and Australia last year, but Sinner isn't, because Sinner had 5 straight wins over Djokovic. So Sinner, I think, was just, like, kind of caught off guard a little bit, and that definitely led him to, like, more vulnerable to loss. But yeah, and afterwards, I think also just Djokovic's ability to defend. He defended 16 out of 18 break points. Because, I mean, in the 5th set, just like throughout, Sinner would force these break points, and Djokovic will manage to find a first serve, he will just manage to find a first serve, which will force, like, a shorter return from Sinner, and Djokovic will just hit it to one of the corners. He saved so many break points that way. And after the match, Djokovic also said that, I feel like I already won, which, fair enough, because I truly think he would have preferred to beat Sinner than to beat Alcaraz, because, I mean, he already showed us that he can beat Alcaraz at his highest level, but it's Sinner that he has struggled against. But this sort of just, like, it just sort of flips the narrative a little. And for me, I really do feel like it's so inspiring, because what do you mean he's 38 years old and he's still out here challenging, like, literally the best 2 players and beating them. And I guess now I kind of want to just talk about the final. So Alcaraz beat Novak in 4. And I think the main theme is, despite having a slow start, Alcaraz was really smart, and he did not lose his composure at all. So his use of drop shots and his ability to find his first serves is pretty, like, impressive, because Alcaraz sort of changed his service motion from last season, and really do think it paid off, because it sort of saved him. Like, because Novak is known for having a great return game, and I think that was evident in the first set where Djokovic was at his best. He was winning 93% of his first serve points, but as the match went on, I felt that Alcaraz was just gaining more of his momentum back, and I think he knew that for Djokovic to sort of maintain that high level of performance, or the quote-unquote, like, flow state, Djokovic, like, has to stay at this really, really high level. And Alcaraz, however, if Alcaraz stepped up a little bit, maybe it could sort of challenge Novak in a way. So Alcaraz did step up, and also I felt like Novak's fitness sort of like fade away a little at the end. But yeah, I think it's just the first set really shows Novak's ability to still play. I mean, he beat Alcaraz 6-2. Like, it was insane, but he's also the only player to defeat Novak in the final at Australia. So yeah, I mean, because of how this was set up, it was just really meaningful regardless of who won. And I'm just really grateful that we got to see, like, these young players, well, like, the level from Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz, but it's just kind of sad that the only player who really can challenge the two is Novak, who's 38 years old. I mean, fair enough, like, the really great players, Joao Fonseca, Jack Draper, who I do think have ability to challenge like, the big two, I guess. are both like injured. Fonseca lost first round, but I think it was because of an injury, and Jack Draper has been dealing with, I think, an elbow injury for a long time. So I mean, it's just really sad that now we have the two best players and Novak is the only one who's like even getting close to challenging them. But I do believe we were fed, and this was a great Australian Open on the men's side. Okay, now let's talk about the final theme of the hit, which is Australian Open Aryna Sabalenka slam / does Sabalenka have a Grand Slam final problem? So going into this tournament, she was obviously the favorite. She won in Brisbane, which is the tournament, like the preparation tournament leading up to this match, and well, to this tournament. And I thought that because she had like this one bad match against Anastasia Potapova, who managed to like dominate with her forehand and force two like pretty close tie breaks, that after that Sabalenka was just going to be cruising through, because sometimes like a player needs to get like one bad match out of the way before they sort of find their form and manage to lock in. And I do want to mention just like Sabalenka's tiebreak record, because she won 20 tiebreaks at Grand Slams in a row, which is crazy because she broke the record that was last held by Djokovic. But just, yeah, like winning 20 tiebreaks and just like the mental fortitude of that is absolutely insane. Like her ability to just immediately turn her game on and just win in like a mere 7 points or so is crazy. And also I feel like it's more like a problem, like as she wins more of these tie breaks, it's going to be more and more of a problem for her opponents, because her opponents will obviously know about the record, and it's going to be sort of a mental thing for their opponents to be like, okay, like we know she's going to win. So yeah, that's really impressive. And also she was really dismissive against the young stars. We had a lot of great younger players who managed to go pretty far. We have Iva Jovic, and we also had Victoria Mboko. And I mean, just her beating these two just really shows how she's like not on the same level as like the young players. Still needs to work really hard if they want to challenge the world number one. Like, for example, against Iva Jovic, I mean, Sabalenka won 6-3, 6-0, and against Victoria Mboko, I believe it was like a tiebreak and 6-1. So yeah, Sabalenka's just, we can really show how like at the top form she is through like these matches. And then she also dismissed Svitolina, who swept an out of form Coco Gauff, which that match ended in like less than an hour. But like, yeah, like, I mean, Coco Gauff was out of shape, but I really thought this was going to be like Sabalenka against Svitolina was going to be closer than that. But yeah, it was just like she was locked in and she was going to get that title no matter what. And then we get to the final. So Rybakina came right off the gate breaking Sabalenka's serve, and I think that also was just like, it kind of caught Sabalenka off guard, because I think Sabalenka have this thing in her mind where the match is always on her racket because of how much power she possesses, and she has to constantly take risks and points. But I think that's not the case against Rybakina, because Rybakina has this power that's sort of just like, it's like this soft power, but she's able to, it's like, I don't think soft is the right word, sorry, it's like effortless. Like she's able to convert and just like hit balls with not that much, like, it's just like this natural power that just comes right to her. And despite that, Sabalenka pressured her throughout the second set and broke when it mattered to level the match, so it became 1-1 and there was a deciding set. Sabalenka broke in the third. It was 3-0, and I felt like at that point everyone thought Sabalenka was going to win. So I don't know if, because I don't think Sabalenka is one player that's like easily distracted because of her tiebreak record. I think she's able to stay concentrated, but suddenly, like 15 minutes later, she got broken back and she's down 3-4. And Rybakina did a really good job at defending when it was her service game to serve it out. But I mean, yeah, I just felt like it was really interesting because of just like the quietness of Rybakina. We don't know what her thoughts are compared to the intensity of Sabalenka, where like she shows so much emotion on court, and we just know at all times what her emotions are and what her thoughts are. It was just like a really interesting matchup, and I really do think Rybakina is one of the only players out there now that is able to just handle Sabalenka like this, because Rybakina, I think this was 2 years ago, where she just completely destroyed Sabalenka in Brisbane with a score of like 6-3, 6-0 in a final. Like, she's able to handle Sabalenka pretty easily, and I think that's something that Sabalenka is not used to. But I mean, this was a good final, but I do feel like both players, they played great, but they didn't like play well at the same time, sort of. I do think the 2023 Australian Open final, which was also these two, was better than this. It was just more entertaining because both players peaked at the same time. I will be leaving a link if you guys want to go check it out in the show notes. And this is Rybakina's first title since her 2022 Wimbledon title. And I think it really just shows that she's back because she continued her good form since winning the WTA finals of last year. And I really do think except for clay, Wimbledon, she's able to win. She already won Wimbledon, but I think she's also going to have a good shot at winning US Open. And I mean, I think I'm really interested to see how she performs in the Middle East swing that's coming up. But yeah, and then we'll talk about Aryna Sabalenka. So, does Sabalenka have a Grand Slam final problem? I don't know. So, she played in 8 Grand Slam finals, and her record is 4-4. So, before this, I thought she had a Coco Gauff problem, just because whenever they played, Coco Gauff's ability to like chase down every single ball, and even if like Coco Gauff's not playing well, just her speed I think really frustrates Sabalenka. So I like compiled sort of like players that Sabalenka lost to and players that Sabalenka beat during the finals. So Sabalenka has wins against Amanda Anisimova from last year's US Open, Jessica Pegula from the US Open 2 years ago, Zheng Qingwen from the 2024 Australian Open, and Aryna Rybakina from the 2023 Australian Open. And then her losses, twice against Coco Gauff, once against Madison Keys here last year, and once against Rybakina this year. So I think the Coco Gauff thing is like, she does have a problem against Coco Gauff. I think for Madison Keys last year, it was honestly just like Madison Keys playing out of her mind because her run last year was so magical. She beat Rybakina, she beat Swiatek, she beat Sabalenka, and she was just on a roll. So I really feel like that's sort of a one-off thing. And this year against Rybakina, I do think something happened in the third set that made her sort of distracted, and it led to this outcome. But I don't think she has a final problem. I just think because she's, from the way she performs at other big moments, for example, in a tiebreak, like her incredible tiebreak record, I don't think she has any problems with getting over the line. But it just happened that it just happened that these players that she lost to, who are incredible players, it all was in a Grand Slam final. But I mean, I think as this goes on, Sabalenka might feel like in her mind that she has a Grand Slam final problem, but for me, I really felt like she has a Coco Gauff problem, and against Madison Keys it was a one-off, and against Rybakina, I mean, this is the one that I'm a little iffy about, because I do think Rybakina is able to meet Sabalenka's power, and that's not a thing I would say for the rest of the tour. So I think Rybakina played well, but Sabalenka was just, I think her slip of concentration, she sort of let this match slip away from her, which was kind of not sort of like what I expected from her. But apart from that, I think if this continues, it will just be more of her mental thing, being like, oh my gosh, like, do I have a problem? Where in reality, I think it could be just like a one-off situation. So yeah. But that is all for the hit. You guys can take a little break and we'll go to the follow-through. Also, all of the matches I mentioned will be linked in the show notes. So if you guys want to go check out the extended highlights, they will all be there. Okay, welcome back. Now we'll talk about the follow-through. So the tournaments that is going on in the next week, because just as you know, tennis is literally going on forever. So for the men's side, we have the Davis Cup qualifiers from the 6th to the 8th of February. So Jack Draper is actually playing for Great Britain, and it's his return after pulling out of Australian Open, so definitely keep an eye out for that. We have Casper Ruud playing for Norway, Valentin Vacherot playing for Monaco, Stefanos Tsitsipas playing for Greece. And then on February 9th, which is I think a week from now, we have 500 events in Dallas and Rotterdam. So for Dallas, we have Denis Shapovalov, the defending champ, Ben Shelton, Taylor Fritz, Tommy Paul, all the US players, Flavio Caboli, and Lerner Tien, who I didn't mention in my main segment, but he was at some pretty high level this year in Australia, so definitely keep an eye out for him at Dallas. And then for Rotterdam, we have Carlos Alcaraz, who's the defending champ, Alexander Zverev, Felix Auger-Aliassime, Daniil Medvedev, and Alex de Minaur, who are all playing, just to name a few. But yeah, I kind of really want to see a rematch between Alcaraz and Zverev, like when it's the best of 3 format. So we'll see. And then for the WTA Tour, guess what? It already started. It started Sunday, which is like when I'm filming it. But yeah, it started for you guys who are listening. It started yesterday. But we have Belinda Bencic, the defending champ, Ekaterina Alexandrova, Clara Towson, Elena Ostapenko, and Alexandra Yala, who are all playing in this tournament. I mean, I really hope Bencic does well, because like coming into Australia, like Australian Open, she was in top form. So yeah, I mean, that's all for today's episode. I know in my introduction in my trailer, I said that each episode is going to be 15 or 20 minutes or so, but I think because this is a Grand Slam, there were just way more for me to talk about, so this is a longer episode. But I think all the other just regular tour episodes isn't going to be this long. But yeah, and next episode we'll talk more about the Abu Dhabi swing and the Davis Cup qualifying. So please subscribe wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed, rate the show. It really helps out a lot. Also comment and DM me ideas for Second Serve. So Second Serve, in case you guys don't know, is a platform where I kind of talk, it's on my Substack, and it's a written form where I go deeper into tennis, a tennis analysis, or just tennis history that I'm interested in, and that's going to be published every month. So tell me if you guys have any ideas of things that you want me to cover. For example, I don't know, the heat rule this year, which kind of impacted Jannik Sinner. So yeah, and also vote in the poll. Remember, at the start when I asked if you guys would rather prefer a slam where all the top seeds are in a draw or a slam where the first few days are crazy with upsets, or just like also comment down below why that is. And also comment down below your favorite match from this year's Australian Open. I will leave mine in a comment too. And yeah, let the serves continue, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.